All right, so it is time. This is Infinite Game. I'll talk about alternative investments, and this is not investment advice, but I am going to be talking about sports cards and things to think about if you're trying to invest in this stuff or collect any of this stuff. So I'm going to be talking about specifically UFC, and I'm going to expand upon the video I did the other day, the difference between supply and demand and how that controls the market. And more specifically, I'm doing this with UFC cards. And I'm going to talk about the history of UFC just because that's a sport I followed for a very long time. And I understand like how demand is, and I've been in the sports card market for about 3 years now. So I kind of understand like how people react and what will probably end up being hot and what not, and just combining history of the sport versus demand of cards right now, so people can kind of think about what they're buying and make better choices. So here's the thing. Back around, I would say 2008, 2009, one of the bigger fighters that people were interested in was Brock Lesnar. He was a heavyweight. He was a former WWE fight champion wrestler. He's a big star, and he got into UFC, and he actually won. He was the heavyweight champion. And back then, his cards probably would have been a premium because people really liked him, and he could really fight. But life cycle of heavyweights is really, really short. So heavyweights normally lose after 2 or 3 title defenses, and that's why heavyweights aren't the best investment when you buy cards. I mean, let's be real here. UFC cards have only really been around since 2009 for UFC Tops round 1, and round 2 that came out in 2009. But in 2008, there was Donruss, and there's some other Fight Kings in 2006. There are a few other ones, but that's super rare, and they're fighters that people mostly don't care about at all. I think people start caring about fighters from 2009 in that Tops UFC round 1 box. Specifically, Brock Lesnar, George St Pierre, Anderson Silva, John Jones. And people think, oh, when we talk about the GOATs, it has to be one of those 3. And I know people are rushing out buying these cards, and it's like, you got to buy the GOATs or whatever. And they had these subscription services of saying, buy these cards. I think that's a mistake, just because when you look at these particular fighters, Anderson Silva, I think he's one of the best to ever do it. A very exciting striker. However, he stayed in the sport too long, and this is what happens to a lot of fighters. They stay in too long, and they're getting knocked out. They're getting beat up. They're getting knocked out over and over again. And newer people coming in, they're like, wait, what? They don't really understand like how great this person was, and they just kind of lose a little bit of respect, and the record gets tarnished and things such as that. Versus someone like George St Pierre, who's still like today. I do think Anderson Silva is slightly more popular, but George St Pierre and his 2009 Tops is his first card, round 1, and he has the auto for round 1, and you have round 2. That's his rookie stuff or debut cards, at least when the cards came out. So for George St Pierre, he did have 2 losses on his resume, but he won against those guys in rematches. So he revenged his losses, and then he fought and won a second title. During the time when I guess it was Brock Lesnar, George St Pierre, Anderson Silva, and John Jones were like the top guys or champions, nobody had 2 belts. So that was kind of like a new thing. And I think George St Pierre did it after Conor McGregor. But so the demand is going to wane just because he was champion and things, if people were going after his cards like that. And then now people are kind of getting it because they think he's the GOAT. But I think Kamaru Usman, even though he's not as popular, Kamaru Usman, he's gained his popularity. Kamaru Usman is going to be better. And I think he may fight at another weight class and win a title. We'll see. But that's one of the things with George St Pierre. And then John Jones, just so many allegations. from things of steroids, just cheating in general, poking eyes or doing things just illegal in fights, just issues with drugs, cocaine, him running over a pregnant lady, him domestic abuse against his wife, just a bunch of stuff. So he's always getting arrested, just all these issues. So if you were investing in him when he was a prospect, when he was probably the most exciting one, is like he's definitely gonna be the best fighter ever, and I still kind of agree with that. You probably lost a bunch of money because people would have been like, "Yo, he's not the best dude." And then later on, you end up getting demand for those guys kind of wane, especially John Jones was out. And then he eventually comes back, wins the light heavyweight championship again, and then kind of goes away for a little bit and then comes back again and then starts winning. But then tailored off. Now he's going heavyweight. So the man is probably going to come back for John Jones, and he could beat Stipe and become interim champion, which would be history. And then maybe fights Francis Ngannou. But here's the thing. The demand isn't consistent, especially let's say with Conor McGregor. Because when he came on the scene, he's probably would have been one of the biggest rookies ever. People were going crazy after him. And I think people are always going to value his cards, but the issue is he's similar, always in trouble. Two different women had assault cases against him. This thing, him punching a woman in an old guy in the face, getting in a fight with Machine Gun Kelly, getting in fights with other people, the whole disrespectful nature of him with Khabib Nurmagomedov and talking about his father, but also the disrespect he had towards Dustin Poirier's wife. Like, he's constantly in the news for things such as that. And then 2016 was probably his height. He came back in 2019 and won. And then I would say after that, actually it was 2019. It was going to 2020. And then he lost Dustin Poirier twice. He's not in the shape or physically able to beat the top guys anymore. At least in the guys who are top 5 to become champion. Like, you have to luck up and have a style of a favorable match for him to actually win the title. And a lot of luck has to come in that. So people buying his cards, things are going to go up because he's going to do more. He's going to do more outside and become a billionaire, but he's still going to have it just because when people get into cards, and if UFC cards really become a thing, I think it's going to be some decades before that really happens. I think things are kind of happening a little too fast right now. But when that happens, people are probably going to go Conor McGregor first. I don't think it's going to be a big mega star like him anymore. And the second person could be Nurmagomedov. I think he may be, I wouldn't say Tim Duncan, but even though his popularity, he has like the second most popular fighter ever, most of it is from Russia, and the diehards there for him. And then I think the people there, most of them won't have that much money, so his cards won't be as valuable in a sense. Next is Israel Alisanya. And his popularity has gone down because he lost to Jan Blachowicz last year. He was undefeated, but then he lost to Jan Blachowicz because Israel wanted to get the light heavyweight championship because John Jones left. And there was speculation that different people were going to change hands for that title. So far, it seems to have been right. But the guy was just too big, really. And he lost in a split decision, I believe. So he had a chance to make history, but he didn't. And it kind of hurt his stock, especially for cards. In this, I want everyone to think about this. The man is going to change. And all these guys I mentioned, only people are going to care about maybe the top 5 people. And honestly, Conor McGregor is probably going to still be up there. And maybe John Jones, maybe depends on what he does at heavyweight. And I think George St Pierre was always going to be there. And then probably Khabib, and then other guys it may wane off. Like people spent all this money on Anderson Silva, he may not be that type of dude, so his card value may go down, and less people, it would be less valuable. So that's something to keep my eye on. The next one, well, Israel Adesanya has a chance. One, he's going to lap the middleweight division. There's a couple of people who could challenge him. Khamzat Chimaev, which I'm about to mention in a second. And the other person is Pereira, who knocked him out in kickboxing. But Israel is more established as a fighter now than when he fought the Pereira guy who was in when it was a kickboxing tournament. He got knocked out. But long term, I do see popularity and things for him increasing. But I do think that, and these are all lower populations until you start getting to 2021, 2022. And then Valentin Shevchenko and Amanda Nunes kind of came to scene. Amanda Nunes is better, but Valentina has a chance to become the second woman to become double champion, which would be big. I don't think necessarily that will happen, but it'd be interesting to see because she's been so dominant. Now, these new guys, I think people should really, really be careful because people are investing in Sean O'Malley, Pally Pimplett, Islam Makhachev, Khamzat Chimaev. The thing about fighting is there's a lot of upsets. I mean, anybody can get beat on any particular day, get caught in a submission out of nowhere, get caught with an elbow or a punch, and end up losing the fight. So people need to be careful. We've seen this with other fighters. People thought Israel was going to win. He didn't. You know, Charles Oliveira has been upsetting people. So Paddy Pimplett, I mean, he'd probably be a champion. Islam may end up becoming champion. Khamzat may end up becoming champion. I don't know if he's going to be Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman may destroy him. But people need to understand that the guys that you're putting your money into, they even may pan out, but there are a lot of other champions. Some of the people I mentioned, their card prices aren't even that high, and it may not be a long-term investment because people are going to forget about them. They may be the Drew Breeses of the fighting world, or they may be, you know, the John Stocktons of the fighting world, or the Bryce Harper of the fighting world, where people don't care as much about them. So I think that's something people should keep in mind. And I will say Islam could win the lightweight championship. I think that's very likely, and defend and be very good. But I don't think he's going to be as popular as Khabib Nurmagomedov, and I don't think anyone like Conor McGregor is going to be coming up that will make that interesting. For Khamzat, it'd be interesting if he could beat Israel Adesanya, but he's not. He struggled with Gilbert Burns. I do think his card's overpriced. He's exciting, but I think his card's overpriced. And I would say the same thing with Kamaru Usman. I think those two dudes will probably beat Khamzat as of right now. And I don't know how long he would keep his popularity in the future. I guess he's the biggest, person since Conor McGregor. But I just don't see it. And I don't see anyone coming up as of right now where it's like they're going to be dominant outside of Israel and Kamaru Usman as fighters. And I guess Alexander Volkanovski, you have Valentina Shevchenko, and then Amanda Nunes if she wins again. So I do think people are reaching a little bit, and people are gambling too much because there are too many people, and demand changes even if you're all-time great. And there's some things that for you to be the best fighter ever, I think you have to win 2 championships in 2 different divisions. And also you probably have to lap your division. And very few people are going to do that. There are a lot of people like Michael Bisping who won a championship. Daniel Cormier, he actually was a 2-time champion. There are other people like, Francis Ngannou, his base or silver card was only $10,000 PSA 10. Now his gold is probably like $500. So a lot of guys are losing demand and losing their value, even though they're popular and they're the baddest person on the planet. So be careful. And if you like the video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you want to hear from me in next.